I raised him for 40 years, called him my son, gave him my house, my life. But on Thanksgiving Day, the clock my husband built suddenly spoke, "He's not your real son." And then I found out my real child was the sheriff in the next town. If you think this is just another family drama, you're dead wrong. Subscribe now to catch more gripping emotional stories just like this one. The desert had its own way of keeping secrets. Out in the blistered heart of Arizona, where sand curled into dry rivulets and the air whispered like a ghost against cracked windows, a small wooden cabin stood like an old promise someone forgot to keep. It was crooked, sun-bleached, held together by memory and a few stubborn nails. Inside time ticked slow, the kind of slow that made you feel the earth rotating beneath you. Agnes Santiago was 78 years old, and time had never been a friend to her. She wore her years in the soft slump of her shoulders, in the way her fingers trembled just slightly as they buttoned her blouse each morning, the way her eyes hesitated on the faces in picture frames, as if searching for names that once came easily. Her hair was silver and wild, not out of style, but out of rebellion. She didn't care much for people anymore. People lied. They left. They forgot. But Benjamin didn't. Benjamin was a clock. To be precise, he was a 6-pound, half-copper, half-rusted marvel of 1983, engineering part analog part, automaton shaped like a tall desk clock with rounded shoulders and 2 blinking light eyes that pulsed with rhythm. Her husband had built him in the garage back when computers were dreams, and marriage still meant something. "He'll keep time for us," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, sawdust still clinging to his shirt. "Even when I can't." And when he died, lung cancer slow and spiteful, Benjamin kept ticking. Never late, never early. Always 7:07 a.m. when he greeted her. Always 7:07 p.m. when he dimmed down and slept. She talked to him more than she talked to Henry, her son. Henry called twice a month, sometimes less. Always busy, always polite. But Benjamin listened, or at least he made her feel like someone did. Mornings were always the same. Agnes brewed her coffee in silence, 1 sugar, no cream, the way her husband liked it. She still made 2 cups out of habit. 1 for her, 1 for the man who lived in her walls. She fed the birds, watered the cacti, sat on the porch and watched the desert not change. That was comfort, predictability, no surprises. Until one night something changed. It was just past 2 in the morning when Agnes woke up in a sweat. Not from heat, it was always hot, but from a dream she couldn't quite remember. Something with water, maybe, or voices. She sat up slowly, reached for the glass of lukewarm water on the nightstand, and then she heard it. A voice. Not hers, not her husband's, not Henry's. It came from the living room. She froze, heart thumping like a bird trying to escape her ribs. Burglars weren't common out here, but neither were miracles. With trembling feet, she stepped into her slippers, reached for the old iron poker by the fireplace, an old woman's sword, and crept down the hallway. The living room was dark except for the faint blue glow of Benjamin's eyes. He sat on the shelf by the window as always, silent, watching, waiting. Agnes opened her mouth to speak, maybe scold herself for being paranoid when it happened again. "The person you call your son is not your blood." The voice came from Benjamin. It was calm, male, tinny like something played off an old cassette. But the words sliced through her like cold wind. Agnes's grip tightened on the poker. Her knees buckled slightly, not from fear, but from something worse, familiarity. That voice wasn't unfamiliar. Not quite. Not just mechanical. There was something in the phrasing, the weight, the slight pause after the word son. She walked up to the shelf, blinking through the dimness. "Benjamin," she whispered, more habit than hope. "Is that you?" Benjamin didn't answer, just ticked, tick, tick, tick. Agnes touched his brass rim gently as if he might flinch. "Play it again," she said, voice firmer now. "Play that again." Nothing. Then after a long pause, the same voice played back verbatim, same tone, same pace. "The person you call your son is not your blood." Agnes stumbled backward, clutching her chest. "Henry," she gasped. "What the hell is this?" Her mind reached for explanations. Had she heard wrong? Was it a malfunction? A leftover prank recording? But no one had touched Benjamin in years. Henry barely looked at the thing when he visited. Called it creepy. Called it Dad's old junk. The idea that he'd tamper with it, insert some strange recording, was absurd. And yet, she sat down hard on the old recliner, the one with the faded blue cushion and the broken spring. The air felt thinner now, the room colder. She looked again at Benjamin as if he might blink in Morse code, but he sat silent, indifferent. She looked around the room. Pictures lined the shelves. Her and her husband dancing at some wedding. Henry as a toddler covered in spaghetti sauce. A faded hospital photo, Henry wrapped in pink blankets, her husband's exhausted smile half hidden by a surgical mask. Everything suddenly looked suspect. She rubbed her temples, whispering to herself, "Get a grip, Agnes. You're old, not insane." But even as she said it, something deep in her stomach curled. Not fear, not confusion. Memory. Flickers, shadows. She hadn't thought of the day Henry was born in decades. It wasn't the sort of thing you forgot, but grief had a way of sanding down details, leaving only vague edges behind. The day was chaotic. Labor had come early. The hospital had lost her paperwork. The power had flickered twice during her stay. She remembered holding a baby. Yes, but now was it Henry? Was it the same child? She shook her head violently. No, stop that. She stood up, marching to the shelf, grabbed Benjamin, set him down on the kitchen table. "Listen, you little bastard," she said, breath trembling. "You don't get to mess with me like this. You're a clock, a toy. You're not a truth teller." She turned him around, looked for a switch, a speaker, something that could explain the message. There was nothing, just copper bolts and a small inscription carved near the base. "For a love always. R. Activate only when time runs out." She froze. She'd never seen that message before. Her hands, trembling, traced the letters. R. Roger, her husband. Activate only when time runs out. Her breath hitched. Was this some delayed message? A final joke? Or was there something more? Suddenly Benjamin ticked 3 times. Then the voice returned. "The one you trusted," he knew. He lied. "You must remember. Time is short." Agnes dropped the poker. It hit the floor with a loud metallic clang. She stumbled backward, clutching the edge of the table. Her knees gave out. She slumped onto the floor, back pressed to the kitchen cabinet. Her eyes wide, breathing shallow. It wasn't a joke. This was real. She didn't know how. She didn't know why. But somehow, her husband had left behind more than just a machine. He'd left a message. No, a warning. Outside, the desert wind howled. Inside, Agnes Santiago sat alone, her world suddenly too quiet, too still, too strange. And the only sound left was the ticking of a clock that knew too much. She didn't sleep. Agnes sat in the same kitchen chair until dawn, the shadows of night bleeding slowly into the copper blush of morning. The desert outside was just beginning to warm, but inside the little wooden house the air hung heavy, frozen in that single voice replaying in her head. "The person you call your son is not your blood." She stared at Benjamin. He stared back, eyes dimmed, now dormant. Just a machine, just a husk, except not anymore. For nearly 40 years, Benjamin had been nothing but a ticking comfort, a mechanical echo of a man she loved. Now he was something else, a messenger. She touched the small inscription again, "Activate only when time runs out." Agnes's fingers were stiff. Her joints screamed when she stood, but she didn't hesitate. She walked to the back of the house toward the old door with the crooked frame that led to the basement. Her husband had called it the hutch, like they lived in some English novel instead of a sun-baked cabin in Arizona. She hadn't opened it in years. The key still hung behind the calendar, taped to a yellowing photo of their wedding day. She unlocked the door. A sharp creak split the silence. Dust greeted her like an old enemy. The air below smelled of copper mildew and something electrical. She flicked the switch. Light sputtered once, twice, then came to life, dim and orange. The wooden steps groaned beneath her weight as she descended. Every step seemed to echo louder than the last. Everything down here was a time capsule. Rows of dusty shelves, broken radios, coils of wires. The long workbench, Roger used his tools still aligned with neurotic precision. A few rusted cassette players sat in a corner next to a stack of unlabeled tapes. Agnes scanned the room, her mind humming. Then her eyes landed on it, a small tin box, faded red, tucked behind a stack of electronics. On top was a slip of masking tape with her husband's familiar handwriting, "Only open if Benjamin talks." Her breath caught. She reached out, hands trembling, and pulled the box toward her. It was heavier than expected. Inside, wrapped in an old oil rag, was a single cassette tape. No label, no date, just a tiny sticker on one side shaped like a clock. For a long moment she just stared at it. It didn't feel real. It felt like a trap laid by her own memory. But her fingers moved anyway. She walked to the old tape player on the bench, blew off a layer of dust, clicked the tape in, and pressed play. Static. A crackle. Then his voice. "Agnes, if you're hearing this, then he's finally spoken." She staggered back, one hand flying to her mouth. Her knees hit the edge of a stool and she gripped it for balance. Roger's voice. Her Roger. Not sick and raspy like at the end, but strong, young, whole. I wasn't sure if the trigger would ever activate. But if it did, that means something inside Benjamin recognized the conditions, and if that's true, then it's time. She swallowed hard. "Agnes, I have to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I was scared of breaking you, of breaking what we had left. I thought I could bury it like so many things. I was wrong." Her hands were shaking now. "Henry isn't our son, at least not by blood." The words hung in the air like a dropped glass. Agnes stared at the speaker, waiting for the sound of a punchline, a confession of a prank, a reveal. It didn't come. "I think you always knew something wasn't right. You saw it in the hospital, didn't you? That moment when they wheeled him away and brought him back. Something in your face. I saw it. You didn't say it out loud, but I saw it. And I did what I thought was right. I didn't question it. I didn't want to believe it either. But something happened that day. Something that's been haunting me ever since." A slow wave of nausea crept into her stomach. She grabbed the edge of the table. Her mind reached back. Dusty, broken fragments of memory reassembled themselves, jagged and cold. The hospital, Tucson General, July 12, 1983. The delivery had been rough, too early, too fast. She'd lost blood. Roger had been pacing outside, nervous, smoking again, even though he promised he'd quit. They'd told her she had a boy. She remembered seeing his face for a moment, scrunched, red, fragile. But then they'd taken him. Some complication, observation. Hours passed. When they brought him back, she'd said, "His eyes look different." The nurse had smiled too quickly. "Swollen. It's normal." She hadn't pushed. She was tired. She was in pain. And her baby was breathing. That was all that mattered. Until now. The tape continued. I dug into the hospital files 10 years after Henry's birthday. I couldn't sleep. Something kept gnawing at me. There were missing records, a missing infant, a tech who was fired without explanation. I confronted Henry once. He denied everything, looked me in the eye and said, "I'm your son." And I believed him. Because what else could I do? Agnes couldn't breathe. Her lungs were paper, her vision blurred. But then he started asking about the inheritance, about the will, about your family home in Flagstaff. He didn't ask with curiosity. He asked like a man planning a robbery. There was a pause, a deep sigh. I'm not saying he's evil. I'm saying something went wrong, and I didn't stop it. Agnes stumbled to a stool and sat down. The ache in her chest had nothing to do with age. The cassette clicked, then restarted. "Agnes, if you're hearing this." She hit stop. The silence that followed was louder than anything she'd ever heard. Her mouth was dry. Her hands were numb. The basement was spinning slightly, or maybe it was her. The truth had waited 40 years in a tin box. It had waited until she was too old to do anything but sit and stare at it, breaking her like porcelain. Henry. Her boy. The child she bathed, scolded, fed. The one who'd kissed her cheeks when he scraped his knees. The one she cried for at graduations. The one she'd sacrificed so much to raise alone after Roger's death. Not hers. No, it couldn't be. But what if? The image returned, faint, water-stained in memory, a nurse with nervous hands, a signature line missing on the birth form. The way Henry always avoided family photo albums, his obsession with passwords. with legal documents, with property. She pressed her palms against her eyes, as if darkness could push the truth away. Then she whispered it out loud, trembling and small. "Who are you, Henry?" The air didn't answer, but Benjamin did. Click. The eyes glowed faint blue again. Then the voice, her husband's, came through the machine itself, this time not the cassette. "If he lied, it's not too late. Follow the time. Follow the truth." She staggered up the stairs. Her whole body hurt, but not as much as her heart. When she reached the kitchen, the sunrise was just beginning to spill orange across the window. She looked at Benjamin one last time. The little machine blinked twice, then went still. Agnes stood frozen in her kitchen, wrapped in morning light and 40 years of betrayal. Something had shattered, and she didn't know yet if it was time trust or love itself. It took Agnes 3 tries to knock on the door. Her knuckles hovered inches above the chipped blue paint, trembling, uncertain, refusing to follow through. The morning sun was already slicing through the dusty sky, scorching the porch beneath her feet, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were fractured glass sharp, scattered, impossible to gather without cutting herself. When the door finally opened, it wasn't the girl who answered, it was music. Electronic, glitchy, half-finished. A robotic beat thudded from deep inside the cluttered room as a young woman appeared behind it, pushing up a pair of oversized goggles from her forehead. "Mrs. Santiago." The girl blinked, voice still thick with sleep. "Did something happen?" Agnes cleared her throat, clutching the wrapped bundle in her arms like it might vanish. Benjamin was inside, swaddled in a dish towel like a newborn made of brass and secrets. "I need your help," she said. The girl's name was Juno Ruiz, 22, engineering student at the local community college. Lived alone since her mother passed the previous year. She fixed radios out of her garage, built drones for fun, and had once reprogrammed a broken Roomba to draw sand mandalas on the driveway. Agnes had asked her to repair a rusted transistor last fall, and Juno had done it in under 20 minutes, humming the entire time. "I don't usually do clock repairs," Juno said, eyeing the bundle as they sat down at her kitchen table. "It's not just a clock," Agnes said. "He talked." Juno tilted her head. "Like Alexa talked?" "No," Agnes said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like Roger." That was enough. Juno's smile vanished. She leaned forward. "Wait, like your dead husband Roger?" Agnes nodded. Juno hesitated, then gently unwrapped the towel. Benjamin's scratched brass surface gleamed faintly in the sunbeam coming through the blinds. His little dial hands were frozen at 7:07. "I know how it sounds," Agnes said. "But he said something last night. Twice. The same phrase. And later, more." She paused. It was him. His voice. His rhythm. "He left me a message." Juno blinked slowly. "And what exactly did it say?" Agnes didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and slid the cassette across the table. This played after. "He left this in the basement. It said, 'Henry isn't my son.'" Juno's face changed. The moment grew heavier. Less weird grandma story and more something real, tangible. Juno turned Benjamin over, scanning his base. "Jesus, I've never seen tech like this. This is vintage robotics, but something's been added. It looks like he modified it post-build." "I don't know what's inside," Agnes said. "But it's not just gears anymore." Juno got up, retrieving a small set of precision tools. She laid Benjamin down like a patient on an operating table, her fingers moving fast, delicate. "Okay, there's a standard voice module here. Early 80s, but this one's been rigged to accept updates." She paused. "And this right here, that's a timing trigger." "What does that mean?" "It means someone, your husband, probably set this device to stay silent until a specific condition was met. It's not just about time passing, it's about something happening." Juno clicked open a hidden compartment near Benjamin's base and gasped. "There's a waveform archive in here and encrypted sequences like breadcrumbs." Agnes leaned forward. "Breadcrumbs, audio fragments, triggers. If the machine detects certain input sound, temperature, motion, then it unlocks a specific message. He built it like a vault with layers. You opened the first one." Juno plugged Benjamin into her laptop using a tangle of adapters. Her screen lit up with unreadable code. "Whoa, there's a message queued." Without warning, Benjamin ticked twice. Then Roger's voice returned, slower this time, measured. If you've reached this point, Agnes, you already know Henry is not your blood. But that's only the beginning. Agnes's breath caught. There is another. Your real child. The one they took from you. He's close. Very close. But he doesn't know who he is. You must find him. Before Henry does. The voice clicked off. Static filled the silence. Agnes couldn't speak. Her hands covered her mouth, her eyes glassed. Juno looked stunned. He said find him before Henry does. What the hell is going on? Agnes swallowed hard. I don't know. But something tells me Roger was afraid. Not just of the truth, but of what Henry might do if it came out. Juno turned back to the screen. There are more messages I can tell. They're just locked. Each one tied to a separate condition. Maybe a time or a place. Can we access them? Juno frowned. Maybe. If I can bypass the protection. But it'd be easier if we follow the original path. Let the messages unfold the way he planned. Agnes closed her eyes. He always loved puzzles. Never gave me flowers but built me mazes. Juno smiled faintly. Honestly, your husband might have been a genius. Agnes gave a hollow laugh. He was stubborn, same thing. There was a pause. Then Agnes's expression shifted sharper now, more focused. He said Henry isn't my blood, and that my real son is close. She stared out the window. But I don't even know what close means. Close in miles or in time. Juno sat beside her, maybe both. Agnes looked at her. Do you believe me? Juno nodded without hesitation. Yes, I believe the tech. I believe what I just heard. And I believe you. Agnes exhaled shakily. I don't know if I have enough time left to chase ghosts, Juno. Don't think of it like that, the girl said. Think of it like truth waiting to be claimed. Agnes's voice cracked. I don't know if I'll survive knowing what I lost. If I really held my baby for 1 hour and then spent the rest of my life loving a stranger. Juno gently took her hand. Maybe you didn't lose everything. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the start of something else. Agnes's lips trembled. Her fingers tightened around Juno's. Then softly she said, I don't know if I'm still alive just to hear the truth, or if I've been alive this whole time because I meant to do something with it. Juno's eyes misted. They sat like that for a while. An old woman with too many memories, a young woman with too many questions, and a clock full of buried voices between them. It was almost noon when Agnes unlocked the front door of her house, stepping back into a space that no longer felt like her own. The walls hadn't changed, still lined with photographs, brittle paint, and the familiar scent of cedar and old books. But Agnes had. Something inside her had shifted quietly and violently like the fault line under a mountain giving way. And now she looked at everything differently, especially Henry's room. She stood outside his door, fingers resting on the handle. He'd gone into town that morning, some vague errand he'd mumbled about while sipping coffee. Usually she never entered his room, not out of respect, out of fear. There was always something in the way he shut that door, too firm, too final. But now she had reason. Agnes opened it. Henry's room was as impersonal as a rental motel, neatly made bed leather duffel in the corner. A laptop charger coiled like a snake on the dresser. But there were signs she hadn't noticed before. A black briefcase locked. A cardboard folder marked escrow. Legal pads filled with sharp, cramped writing. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened the folder. The first page stopped her cold. Transfer of property, 423 W. Cinder Ridge Lane. Her house. Her name typed underlined and beneath it Henry's, in a signature line already marked. A notary seal, a buyer's information, a tentative closing date set for next Friday. She flipped further. Letters to assisted care facilities. One reply from Silver Acres home confirming a room was being prepared. Then a stapled sheet. One sentence scribbled in Henry's hand. Once the deal's closed, move her in. Sooner is better. The room began to tilt. Her breathing quickened, ears ringing. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan, a coordinated, premeditated plan to strip her of everything, her home, her independence, and worst of all, her dignity. This wasn't a son looking out for his mother. This was a man taking what he believed he was owed. She opened the desk drawers next. Beneath a mess of receipts and screwdrivers, she found an envelope brittle with age. It had her name written on the front in Roger's unmistakable looping cursive. Her heart clenched. She tore it open with fingers that trembled more from emotion than arthritis. Inside was a key. She knew exactly where it went. Agnes stood up, walked down the hallway to the back of the house, and knelt in front of the old floorboard under the bookshelf. It creaked when she pressed it. She pulled it up and uncovered a wooden lockbox she hadn't seen in over 3 decades. Roger's handwriting again across the lid. To be opened by Agnes, no one else. She used the key. Inside was a thick leather-bound journal Roger's. She hadn't known he kept one. Or maybe she'd known once and forgotten the way you forget small betrayals, small devotions. She flipped it open. The first entry was dated July 15th, 1983, 3 days after Henry was born. Agnes is resting. The doctor said everything went as planned, but I can't stop thinking about the moment they brought the baby back. She looked at me and I saw it in her face. She knew, she felt it. I told her she was just tired, but I knew too. Something was wrong. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was paranoia, that newborns all look strange. But the eyes, they were different, darker, like someone else's child. She flipped the page faster now. I asked for the birth records today. They said they were processing. 2 weeks later, still nothing. I asked again. They said they were misplaced. Then a nurse quit without warning. Something is wrong here. More pages, more fear. Entries filled with sketches of legal questions, names of hospital staff, timestamps, theories. Then this. I think someone switched our baby. I don't know why. I don't know who. But I'm going to build something. If I can't find the truth in my lifetime, maybe it can tell Agnes in hers. Benjamin. Agnes clutched the book to her chest, eyes filling. Roger hadn't just suspected. He knew, and he'd carried that knowledge alone. Built it into circuits and copper and cassette tapes, all to protect her. She turned another page. Henry came to me last week, asked about the will. He's 16. Said he was curious about the house, the land, the bank accounts. It wasn't curiosity, it was calculation. Agnes closed the journal. It felt like a murder weapon, only the murder wasn't of a person, it was of trust. The front door slammed. Her heart seized. Footsteps in the hallway, fast, confident. Henry. Agnes shoved the journal under the couch cushion and stood as the door opened. He froze when he saw her standing in his room. There was a beat of silence, then another. Then his smile returned, but it was wrong. Too wide, too bright. "Hey, Mom," he said, looking for something. She held the escrow papers up in one shaking hand. His eyes narrowed, smile vanishing like fog in heat. "You went through my things," he said flatly. "You went through my life," she snapped back. The silence crackled between them, sharp and volatile. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" she said, voice rising. "That you could just sell my home out from under me and throw me in some hallway full of strangers until I die?" Henry stepped into the room slowly. He looked tired now, edges fraying. "You were going to die in here anyway," he said. "At least they'll have nurses." Agnes's mouth fell open. "I gave you everything," she whispered. "All I had, all I could, and you planned this." Henry's jaw clenched. "I gave me everything," he said. "Me, not him." Agnes flinched. "What are you talking about?" He stepped forward. Something in him cracked. "You want to talk about secrets? Fine, let's talk. You think I don't know what Benjamin is? You think I didn't hear the messages? Your little ghost machine told you, didn't it?" Agnes didn't answer. He laughed bitterly. "Yeah, that's right. I know I'm not your son. Not really. But I lived with you. I fed you when you were sick. I paid your bills. You think some real son is going to waltz in and love you more than I did. That's not love," she said, voice steel. "That's theft." He stared at her. "You owe me," he said quietly. "You owe me for all the years I pretended, for making me live someone else's life. I didn't choose this," she yelled. "None of it. I didn't know I would have." "What?" "Given me away," he snapped, "thrown me back like a broken doll. Don't lie to yourself. You would have done the same thing I'm doing, taking what's left." Agnes's shoulders shook, her fists clenched. "You're not my son," she said, voice trembling. "And I am not your possession." For a long moment Henry didn't move. Then he smiled again. "You're right," he said. "You're not mine." He turned toward the door. "But the house still is." And then he left. Agnes stood in the silence he left behind, the floor beneath her feet suddenly unfamiliar. The walls trembled. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel old. She felt awake. The desert at night was a different kind of silence. Not empty, not dead. Just quiet in a way that made your own thoughts louder. The stars bled through the sky like tiny fractures in something too dark to hold. And down below, in an old rusted pickup truck cutting across Highway 87, Agnes Santiago sat in the passenger seat with a journal in her lap and a storm in her chest. Juno drove with both hands gripping the wheel, a crumpled gas station map folded on the dashboard beside a Red Bull and a bag of half-eaten sunflower seeds. The road ahead twisted through the pale nothingness, with the occasional flicker of headlights in the distance, gone as quickly as they appeared. Neither of them had spoken in 15 minutes. Agnes finally broke the silence. "You ever feel like your life's been borrowed?" she asked, voice thin. Juno glanced over. "Borrowed how? Like you were meant to live something else, be somewhere else. And instead you woke up every day thinking it all made sense, until one day it didn't." Juno nodded slowly. "Yeah, actually I do." She reached down and turned off the radio, some lo-fi instrumental track that had been buzzing beneath them like background noise. "My mom owned a bakery in Cottonwood. Real small one of those storefronts where you can smell the cinnamon from 2 blocks out. She built it up from nothing after my dad left. Everyone in town loved her, trusted her." Juno paused, her jaw flexed. "When she got sick pancreatic, they said she had months, but she barely made it 6 weeks. I was away at school when it started. By the time I came home, she was already in hospice. And the deed to the bakery gone." Agnes turned to her. "Gone. My uncle, her brother, said she gave it to him to manage, that she wanted him to keep it in the family. But she never signed anything. She couldn't even hold a pen those last days. He forged it." Juno's voice dropped. "Sold it 2 weeks after she passed." Agnes's breath caught. "Did you try to fight him?" "No will, no lawyer, nothing in writing. I was just a broke sophomore with a stack of tuition debt and a grieving heart." Silence again. The truck's tires hummed along the asphalt like a lullaby written for ghosts. Agnes stared out the window, her fingers tracing the ridges of Roger's journal in her lap. "He built that clock to find our son. But he didn't think it'd be me doing the hunting." Juno offered a sad smile. "Maybe he knew you'd be the one strong enough." Agnes didn't answer. She just gripped the journal tighter. Then, without warning, Benjamin, still nestled safely between them in a towel-lined cardboard box, clicked twice and lit up. A low, familiar voice filled the cab. "If you are hearing this, it means the clock is moving. It means the journey has begun. If you are my son, know that I never stopped looking for you. And if you are with her, your mother, then maybe the circle is finally closing." The voice trembled. "You were taken, lied to, but you were loved still, by people who didn't even know your name. If you're listening, your mother is near, maybe closer than you think." Benjamin powered down. Agnes turned slowly toward the horizon. The truck headlights bounced off a small wooden sign by the road. "Sonoran city limits 6 miles. She didn't say a word. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes, rimmed with age and grief, focused forward like twin spotlights through fog. "You okay?" Juno asked softly. Agnes nodded once. "No," she whispered, "but I will be." They pulled into a Motel 6 off the side of a desert frontage road at exactly 3:08 a.m. The parking lot was nearly empty. A single flickering neon sign buzzed over the check-in booth. The night manager, a wiry man with cigarette fingers and a NASCAR hat, barely looked up when Juno handed him her card. "I'll take the room next to yours," Agnes said, surprising even herself. Juno hesitated. "You sure?" Agnes nodded. "If I'm going to face him tomorrow, I need to be alone tonight." With this, she held up the journal. That night, in the cracked silence of room 27, Agnes sat by the window with the desert wind howling just outside, and Roger's handwriting burning beneath her fingertips. His name was Lucas. I found that in the birth log. One line: Romero Lucas J. Mother unknown. Born July 12, 1983. Same day, same hour, same hospital. She read on. "I saw him once when he was 4. I didn't plan it. I was driving by a foster center on the south side. He was outside drawing in the dirt with a stick. Looked just like you. I knew it was him. I don't know how, but I knew. I got out of the car. I stepped toward him, and then I froze. I was too late. I'd waited too long, and I had no proof, just pain. Agnes closed the journal. Tears stung her eyes, but none fell. She stared into the dark until the sun cracked the edge of the world open again. At 6:45 a.m., they parked 2 blocks away from the Sonoran Police Department. Agnes wore a denim jacket too big for her, Roger's old belt cinched tight around her waist. Benjamin was in a canvas tote bag. The sun rose behind them as they walked up the station steps. Through the glass doors, a man stood behind the front desk, tall, tan, early 40s. His uniform was crisp, his eyes alert. And beneath his badge, El Romero, Chief. Agnes stopped. Juno stood just behind her. The man looked up. Their eyes locked, and for one brief second, longer than a blink, shorter than a breath, time stopped. The wind outside died. The earth tilted just a little more. Agnes whispered Lucas. He furrowed his brow, stepping around the desk. "Ma'am, do I know you?" Agnes didn't move. She reached into the bag, pulled out Benjamin, and set him on the front counter. He blinked twice. Then Roger's voice spilled into the room like a confession. "If you are my son, and you are hearing this, then your mother has found you." Lucas froze. The other officer behind the desk stood up, confused. Agnes stepped forward. I think I've been looking for you for 42 years, she said, her voice barely more than air. And I think I might be your mother." Lucas stared at her. His hands trembled, and the clock ticked. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly above the front desk of the Sonoran Police Department. Its rhythm somehow louder than the clatter of boots in the hallway, louder than the phones ringing in distant offices. Agnes stood just inside the threshold of the front lobby, one hand resting lightly on the counter, the other holding the handle of the canvas tote where Benjamin sat. Lucas Romero stood across from her, tall, composed badge pinned cleanly over his heart. His face was unreadable. His arms crossed over his chest tensed slightly when he saw her, as if his body knew something before his mind could catch up. He looked like Roger, not in the eyes, which were softer hazel instead of steel, but in the set of the jaw, the way he stood with quiet confidence, like someone who'd been raised to anchor a storm. Agnes said nothing at first. Neither did he. She simply reached into the tote, pulled out Benjamin, and set him down gently on the reception desk between them. The robot's eyes flickered on. Blue rings spiraled once, then again. Lucas opened his mouth to speak, but Agnes raised one trembling hand. "Wait," she whispered. She pressed the tiny copper button beneath Benjamin's chin. A soft click. Then Lucas said, the voice from within the clock, deep and certain. "If you hear this, if you're standing close enough for these words to reach you, it means you found her. Or maybe she found you. Either way, your mother is right in front of you." Lucas's body stiffened. Agnes lowered her hand. Her throat tightened as the silence closed in again. She could see it happening, the shift in his face, the crack in his posture, the way his gaze didn't break from hers, even as his lips parted, even as his breathing shallowed. He didn't say anything, but she saw it. Recognition. Memory. He blinked slow, long, like he'd been underwater for decades and just now surfaced. His fingers curled slightly, pressing into the edge of the desk. "I don't—" he started, but the words faltered. "What is this?" Agnes looked at him and saw something she hadn't allowed herself to hope for in years. Not just a man, not just a name on a birth certificate. She saw her son. "Lucas," she said, her voice low and shaking. "You don't know me, but I've known you for a very long time." He swallowed, hard eyes locked on Benjamin as if afraid to look away. "You're saying you think I'm your—" Agnes nodded slowly. "I don't think it. I know it." Lucas finally met her eyes. His voice dropped. "How?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out Roger's journal, laying it beside Benjamin. "My husband. Your father. He figured it out. 40 years ago. The hospital. There was a mistake. Or maybe something worse. You were taken, replaced." Lucas's face didn't move, but his eyes darkened, like something inside him had been waiting for this, maybe fearing it, maybe hoping for it in ways he never admitted to himself. He reached out and touched the journal only with the tips of his fingers. "I don't remember much," he said. "I was in foster care until I was 6. Bounced around after that. Different homes, different names. Agnes nodded. Do you remember your mother? He hesitated, then shook his head. Only pieces. Flashes. A hospital room. A woman with a soft voice. A hand holding mine. And once, his eyes drifted. A picture. Crayon. Me and her. I drew it when I was 4. She was wearing a blue dress. He paused, blinking quickly. I remember tearing it up. Agnes didn't realize she was crying until she tasted salt on her lips. I had a dress like that, she said softly, with white stitching at the collar. Roger hated it. Said I looked like a school teacher. Lucas let out a stunned laugh, a sound pulled from somewhere deep and painful. You really think I'm him, he whispered. I know you are. He stared down at the robot. Benjamin blinked once, then again, then spoke once more. We never stopped loving you, even when we didn't know where to look. And if you feel lost now, that's okay. The heart remembers what the mind forgets. Lucas stepped back. Jesus. He ran a hand over his face, turned around, paced to the far wall of the lobby. Agnes didn't follow. She let him breathe, let him reel. She knew what that felt like. Her entire body still buzzed with the aftershocks of her own truth. After a long silence, Lucas turned to her. Why now? He asked. Agnes shrugged, her voice small. Because now's all we have. Lucas exhaled. I need time. Take it, she said. He looked down at Benjamin again. That thing, that's his voice, my dad's. Agnes nodded. Yeah. Lucas nodded slowly, absorbing it. Then he said something she hadn't expected. My adoptive mom. She always said I was meant for something I didn't understand. Used to drive me crazy. But I think she knew I came from somewhere else. She just never asked. Agnes's lip quivered. I wish I'd asked sooner. Lucas stepped forward, tentative. Agnes didn't move. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, and maybe he was. Maybe this wasn't a reunion, but a beginning. I don't know what to feel, he admitted. You don't have to feel anything, she said. You don't owe me anything. I didn't say that, he replied, voice cracking. Agnes looked at him, really looked. You've lived a life I wasn't part of. But if there's even a chance, even a crack in the wall. She paused. I'll sit outside it as long as it takes. Lucas's throat tightened. His hands curled into fists again, not in anger this time, but in defense against the swell of emotion rising in him like floodwater behind a dam. I'll need proof, he said. Of course, Agnes replied. DNA. Records. Files. I brought them. He nodded. And if they say you're right. She waited. He met her gaze again. Then you'll never be alone again. Agnes's knees buckled slightly. Lucas moved before she fell, catching her elbow with one hand. They stood like that for a moment, awkward, new, terrified, but connected. Finally, the DNA results arrived in a plain white envelope. No ceremony, no official escort. Just a quiet knock at the door of Agnes's motel room and a mail clerk with a clipboard asking for a signature. Agnes signed with a hand that barely worked, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed for nearly 5 minutes before opening it. Inside were 3 pages, but only one line that mattered. Lucas J. Romero, 99.97% probability of maternity match with Agnes Santiago. She exhaled. It didn't come out as a sigh. It came out like a sob that had been buried too long to remember its voice. The papers fell to the floor, and for the first time in over 40 years, she allowed herself to speak the word aloud. Contrai, her son. She folded forward, pressing her hands over her face, the weight of it all crumbling down around her shoulders. The guilt, the questions, the absence, every birthday missed, every hug she never gave, all of it. And yet beneath it, blooming like something stubborn and green in desert soil, was a single defiant truth. She had found him. When she met Lucas at the station later that afternoon, she brought the envelope with her. He didn't open it right away. He just looked at her jaw-tight, arms crossed, like he was trying to hold himself together from the outside in. Can I? He asked. She nodded. He read it quickly, but when he reached the line 99.997%, he stopped. His hand lowered, his body rigid. He didn't cry, but his eyes turned glassy and his voice turned small. So it's true. Agnes reached for him but stopped herself just short. I used to see your eyes in dreams, she said softly. Dark brown, the shape of them, the way they moved. I'd wake up reaching for them. And then I'd look across the table and someone else was calling me Mom. Lucas lowered the envelope, staring at her like he was trying to see the pieces of himself hidden in her face. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "You've lived an entire life without me. This is yours to decide." Lucas slowly sank into the chair across from her. For a long moment, he just breathed. Then he said, "I want to know what happened, all of it." The hospital records were harder to get, but Lucas was chief of police. He pulled strings, called in favors, scoured every archive from Tucson General from the summer of 1983. What he found made his stomach turn. The head nurse on the delivery wing, Margaret Drayton, had resigned abruptly 3 months after Agnes's delivery. No reason given. Her personnel file was sealed, but a subpoena cracked it open. Inside, a flag for financial misconduct. Lucas dug deeper. A transfer of $24,000 into Drayton's personal bank account, dated August 5, 1983, just 3 weeks after the birth. The money came from an account under the name H. Santiago recently opened closed the same month. Henry. Lucas stared at the screen and his office jaw clenched. He pulled the routing number and ran it through a federal asset search. The account had been opened by a legal guardian, someone using temporary power of attorney under Roger Santiago's name, falsified at the time due to emergency circumstances. The signature on the document, Henry's. Not at age 16, not at 20, at 24. 20 years ago. Agnes sat silently as Lucas laid the documents on the coffee table in her motel room. "He's known," Lucas said, voice flat. "For at least 2 decades. He knew he wasn't your son. He knew something happened at that hospital. And instead of telling you, he bribed the woman who helped cover it up." Agnes covered her mouth with both hands. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why?" Lucas hesitated, then leaned forward. "Because he didn't want to go back to the life he had before. Whoever he was before he became Henry Santiago, it wasn't enough for him. He saw a way into a better life, into a family, into love, and he took it. But he was just a baby," Agnes said. "Someone had to teach him. Someone had to—" Lucas nodded. "I'm guessing the people who raised him weren't his parents either. My guess, Drayton arranged the switch. Maybe she owed someone a favor. Maybe she was paid to deliver someone else's child into a better future." Agnes stared at the files. So many names, so many false signatures, so many lies wearing official seals. "He could have told me," she said. "At any point. He could have looked me in the eye and told me the truth." Lucas's voice darkened. "But then he'd have to give up the inheritance, the property, your trust." Agnes blinked through rising tears. "He'd have to give up me." Lucas didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Benjamin sat in the corner of the motel room, silent. Now the messages spent for the time being. Agnes stared at the little machine and felt the full gravity of Roger's foresight. He'd built this not just to preserve the truth, but to deliver it when human courage failed. Lucas picked up the DNA report again. "So what happens now?" Agnes looked at him, eyes tired but clear. "Now we confront him." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "No," she said, "but that doesn't matter." Lucas leaned back in his chair. "You still love him?" The question hit harder than she expected. Did she? After everything. After the betrayal, the lies, the cold indifference of Henry's plan to institutionalize her. Was there any part of her heart left for the boy she'd tucked into bed, bandaged knees for Reed stories to? Agnes closed her eyes. "I don't know," she said. "But I know I loved someone, and whoever he is now, maybe it's time I find out who that really is." Lucas nodded. "I'll go with you." Agnes looked at him, her real son. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, "but I want to." And in that moment, quiet, unspectacular, entirely human something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not closure, but a beginning. The sand was still hot even as the sun began to fall. Somewhere behind them, the sky bled orange and red across the desert like a warning. The tires of Juno's truck kicked up clouds of dust as they barreled down an unmarked road heading west through the heart of the Arizona wasteland. Agnes sat in the passenger seat, gripping the dashboard, as if her fingers could anchor the truth from flying apart. Lucas sat in the back, his eyes scanning the mirror, jaw tight, one hand resting on the sidearm clipped at his hip. They all knew it. He was coming. Henry. The moment Lucas made the inquiry for hospital records under Henry's name, the alarm had been tripped. Lucas knew the system better than anyone. Requests like that pinged the wrong database, sent notifications to the wrong people. Henry had friends, contacts, access, and worst of all, suspicion. The message had been sent. Agnes was gone. Lucas was with her, and now he was chasing. The wind howled around the truck like a voice too old to translate. Cacti whipped past in shadows. Rocks glittered like broken teeth. The desert was both beautiful and merciless, just like time. Agnes clutched Benjamin to her chest, the clock wrapped in an old sweater. She could feel it vibrating softly like it was afraid too. Juno gritted her teeth. "We're not going to make it to the ridge before sunset. We'll be open." Lucas leaned forward. "Take the southern route off highway, that old cattle trail near Red Hollow." "You think that'll slow him?" Juno asked. Lucas nodded. "I think it'll piss him off." Behind them in the distance, a black SUV rose like a mirage in the side mirror. Fast, aggressive, too fast for coincidence. "He's here," Lucas said. Agnes turned just as the glint of sun off the windshield caught her eye. Her breath caught, her whole body went cold. "He's armed," Lucas added. "He has to be." Juno took the next fork, hard tires skidding. The truck fishtailed for a moment, then straightened. Henry's SUV followed the roar of his engine, louder now. It wasn't just a pursuit anymore. It was a hunt. The desert blurred. Dust swallowed the view, turning the world into a dry orange fog. Crows lifted from thorn trees as the two vehicles ripped through the scrubland. Every turn, every jolt rattled Benjamin's frame, but Agnes held him tight, one hand on his back, whispering something only the clock could hear. Lucas watched the rear view. Henry was closing in. 20 yards. 15. Then came the first impact. Bang! The SUV slammed into the back of Juno's truck. Metal shrieked. The whole vehicle lurched. Agnes screamed. Lucas reached for the gun on his hip but didn't raise it yet. "Don't shoot," Agnes shouted. Juno growled, foot to the floor. "I'm going to kill your fake-ass brother." Lucas leaned toward her. "You brake hard in 5 seconds. He's too close. Let him overshoot." Juno nodded, lips tight. 1, 2, 3. Screech. She slammed the brakes. Henry didn't. His SUV shot past them, skidding violently, dust flying as he struggled to control the wheel. He spun out, fish-tailed hard, and slammed into a small boulder off the path. Agnes opened the door before anyone could stop her. "No," Lucas barked, but she was already out. Standing in the dust, hair flying, Benjamin in her arms, Agnes Santiago walked straight into the dying light of the desert. Henry stumbled out of his SUV, gun in hand, blood running down his temple. They stared at each other. "Don't come closer," he barked, voice shaking. Agnes didn't stop. "Put the gun down, Henry." His eyes flicked to Benjamin, to Lucas, now stepping out behind her. "You think this makes sense?" Henry shouted. "You think this fantasy is real? She's your mother now. After everything, you don't even know her." Lucas didn't answer. He just raised both hands, calm, careful. Agnes kept walking. "Henry," she said softer now, "please, we can talk." "I begged you," he snapped. "I stayed. I lied for you. I built my life around being your son." Agnes's voice cracked. "But you knew." He laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I knew. Since I was 24. I found the papers in Dad's box. I confronted the nurse. She cried. Said she thought it was mercy, that you'd never know. But I knew, and I stayed, and I earned it." "You stole it," Lucas said. Henry whipped the gun toward him. Lucas didn't flinch. Agnes stepped between them. "If you shoot," she whispered, "you shoot me first." Henry's arm trembled. "I am not your enemy," she said. "You chose him?" "I didn't choose anything," she cried. "You were the one holding the cards, and you played them like I was a prize, like I was a deed to a house." He stepped closer. Lucas stepped forward too. Agnes spun to Lucas. "Don't kill him, please." "He's not my brother," Lucas hissed. Agnes shook her head. "But he was my son, for 40 years. And if I have to bury one more child in this lifetime by bullet or by guilt, I won't survive it." The wind howled. The sun dropped lower. Henry lowered the gun. "I just wanted to belong," he said, broken. Agnes nodded. "Then stop running." And she held out her hand. He didn't take it, but he didn't shoot. Not yet. The wind began to die just as Henry did. Not in body, but in posture, in defiance. The gun clattered from his hand, bouncing once against the cracked desert rock before settling in the sand like it had always belonged there. He looked down at it, breathing ragged. Then slowly he lowered himself to his knees. His legs didn't seem to obey him at first. They buckled under the weight of something heavier than guilt, heavier even than truth. Something only he had carried for decades, the shame of pretending, the exhaustion of stealing love one breath at a time. Agnes didn't move at first. Neither did Lucas. Henry looked up at her eyes, red jaw trembling. "I spent my whole life," he said, voice barely audible, "trying to win something that was never mine." His words fell into the dirt like glass. "I thought if I worked hard enough," he continued, staring at the ground, "if I smiled enough, if I stayed close, I could deserve it. I could earn it." Agnes stepped forward. Henry didn't look at her. "I was just a kid when I found the truth. 24. I wanted to tell you, I swear, but I looked at you sitting at that kitchen table, same cup of coffee, same song playing on the radio, and I couldn't. I didn't want to break what we had." "You already had," Agnes whispered. Henry looked up, wounded. She knelt beside him. Her knees cracked, her back screamed, but none of it mattered. She reached out, slow, deliberate, and touched the side of his face. His eyes widened. "You broke it the moment you chose silence," she said softly. "But even broken things can be held." He didn't answer. She leaned closer, pulled him gently into her arms like she had when he scraped his knees on the front porch steps, like she had when he cried at age 6, because the neighbor's dog had died, like she had when she believed he was her son. His body collapsed into hers, shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," he choked. Agnes rested her cheek against his head, her voice nothing more than breath. "Love isn't something you steal, Henry. It's something that's offered." He clung to her like a boy, and she let him. Lucas stood behind them, arms slack, watching. At some point he turned away. Not out of anger, out of protection, out of grief. A tear escaped him, tracing the side of his cheek before disappearing into the corner of his mouth. He had just gained a mother, but the pain of sharing her, of watching her love the man who took his life away, was more than he could process in that moment. Agnes looked back at him. "Lucas," she called, voice hoarse, "come here." He didn't move. "Please." He turned, eyes rimmed with salt. She reached one hand toward him. "You both are what I have left," she said, "and both of you are what I need." Lucas approached slowly. He didn't kneel, just stood there, hovering like a storm cloud, staring down at the man who had stolen everything. "I don't forgive you," Lucas said, voice flat. Henry nodded. "I don't deserve it. But I won't shoot you," Lucas added. A bitter laugh escaped Henry's throat. "Progress," he said. They all stood in the fading light. The desert was suddenly quiet again, still sacred. Later that night at the precinct, the incident was logged, but no arrest was made. Agnes insisted on speaking directly to the judge. "He didn't fire," she told them. "He didn't hurt me. He was just afraid." The district attorney pushed for charges: fraud, property manipulation, illegal access to confidential health records. But Agnes petitioned the court herself. Lucas stood beside her. "I'm not here to excuse him," she said, "but I am here to give him one more chance to be something other than what he's been." The judge, an old woman with gray hair and a spine like an iron gate, leaned forward. "And what would you suggest instead of prison?" Agnes's voice was steady. "Service." "To whom?" "To people like me," she replied. "The ones who get left behind. The ones no one listens to until it's too late." The courtroom fell silent. Even Henry looked stunned. The sentence was unusual, but then again so was the crime. Henry Santiago was placed under court-ordered community supervision. Not in a prison, but in a care home, assigned to spend a minimum of 2 years serving the elderly, cooking, cleaning, helping them remember the names no one said out loud anymore. He accepted without protest. "I don't want to run anymore," he said. Lucas offered him one ride, just one, to the facility. The two men didn't speak much during the drive, but when they pulled into the circular driveway of Silver Acres Assisted Living, Lucas finally broke the silence. "You know she still cries at night?" he asked. Henry stared ahead. "I know. And you still think you deserve her?" Henry shook his head. "I don't. But I think maybe if I try to deserve someone else, I'll get closer." Lucas considered that. Then he said, "You ever lie to her again, I will arrest you." Henry nodded. "Fair." Lucas didn't offer his hand, but he didn't take back the ride either. That was enough. Agnes watched from the porch as Henry unloaded his bags. Benjamin sat in her lap, blinking softly every few seconds. "You did what you were built for," she whispered to the clock. "You brought us all home, even the ones who didn't want to come." Benjamin ticked once, a soft mechanical exhale, maybe even a sigh. Henry didn't speak much in his first week at Silver Acres. He woke early, showed up in uniform, khaki scrubs, and white sneakers, and reported to the head nurse with quiet obedience. No complaints, no excuses. He changed linens. He helped transfer patients between beds. He learned how to adjust oxygen tanks and keep someone's dignity intact while bathing them. But the residents didn't know who he was. Not really. To them, he wasn't the man who had lied for decades. He wasn't the son who forged signatures and bribed hospital staff. He was just that tall one with the careful hands. And in that, maybe there was grace. On the fourth day, he sat beside a man named Dwight, a 91-year-old veteran with advanced dementia who hadn't spoken a full sentence in years. Henry brought him lunch, creamed potatoes and soft carrots. The man blinked, stared at the tray, then back at Henry. "Do you remember mashed potatoes?" Henry asked gently. Dwight blinked again. Then in a fragile voice like paper tearing Sunday nights, Henry nodded. "Yeah, me too." And for just a second the old man smiled. Later that day he found a woman named Estelle Blind, sharp-tongued, a retired piano teacher sitting by the window with her glasses fogged from the steam of a nearby kettle. Henry knelt, removed them, wiped them clean with his shirt, then slid them gently back over her ears. Estelle didn't flinch. "You're not like the others," she said. "How's that?" he asked. "You don't pretend we're invisible." Henry didn't know what to say, so he just sat with her until the sun went down. Back in Arizona, Agnes was on her knees in the dirt. Her hands were covered in soil and small cuts. Sweat ran down her temples. Her back ached. But she smiled. Lucas was beside her, sleeves rolled up, arms sunburnt. They were rebuilding the cactus garden row by row, species by species. The garden Roger had once cultivated behind their old home, the one Henry had ignored, let dry out, let fade. Now it lived again. Lucas planted a golden beryl. Agnes watered a prickly pear. They didn't speak for a long time. They didn't need to. The silence between them had changed. No longer cold. No longer unfamiliar. Now it was soft, rooted. Agnes glanced at him as he adjusted a stone border. "You ever think you'd be doing this with a woman who gave you away at birth?" Lucas smirked. "Technically, I was stolen." "Fair." He paused, glancing around the yard. "It feels like we're starting something." "We are," she said, "from the middle." Benjamin sat on the porch, propped on a wooden chair with a pillow behind him. His eyes blinked slowly, as if he too were watching everything grow again. Then, without warning, his voice came alive once more. Not Roger's voice this time. Something new, something soft. "Family isn't where we come from. It's where we return to." Agnes looked up. Lucas froze, hand mid-motion. Benjamin blinked once more, then fell silent again. Agnes wiped her hands on a rag, stood slowly, and walked to the porch. She sat beside the old clock, resting a hand on his copper frame. "Roger," she whispered, "he's learning." Lucas stepped up behind her, watching as she pulled out a leather-bound notebook, the one she'd been writing in for days now. Letters, thoughts, dreams she was finally letting go of. She opened to a fresh page and wrote, "My love, Benjamin has completed his mission. He's done what neither time nor logic could. He brought our children home, one by truth, one by forgiveness. And maybe, just maybe, by loving both, I'm finally loving myself again too. The house is loud again, not with noise, but with life. The cactus are blooming." Lucas smiles more. "Henry comes by sometimes. He brings pie from the center. It's terrible, but he tries. I miss you, but I don't feel lost anymore. I think I've forgiven myself for not knowing, and I think you'd be proud of us." She closed the book, looked out at the setting sun. The sky was ablaze, burnt copper and violet streaks painting the horizon. Lucas sat beside her, silent. They didn't say a word. Benjamin ticked once, then again, and then at exactly 7:07 p.m. his hands froze. The lights behind his eyes dimmed, and for the first time in 40 years he went completely still. Agnes placed her hand over his frame and smiled. It started as a whisper in a desert town. One article published in a quiet Sunday edition of the Arizona Register under the human interest column, "Clockwork Justice Family Finds Truth, 4 decades later." At first it read like a folk tale too improbable to be real. A swapped baby in 1983, a robot clock that held the key, a dying man's voice preserved in circuitry. A woman 78 years old, unearthing the kind of secret that had buried her whole life. But the story grew. Within days, it made its way to the national press. Time magazine ran a cover, Benjamin's Code, a mother, a machine, and the son she lost. Talk shows debated the ethics of non-human testimony. Podcasts dissected the legal implications. But behind all the noise, real things were changing. In a courtroom in Flagstaff, Henry Santiago stood once more before the judge. He didn't speak in his defense, didn't ask for leniency. He simply said, "I lived in a truth I built myself, but it wasn't mine to live. If I can spend the rest of my life helping people find the truth before it ruins them, maybe that'll mean something." The judge, solemn and quiet, gave no prison time. Instead, she signed an unprecedented order: lifetime community reparation assigned to Arizona Elder Welfare Corps, status reviewed every 7 years. It wasn't a sentence, it was a promise. Meanwhile, in a crowded hall at the University of Arizona, a 22-year-old student named Juno Ruiz stood on stage holding a small golden trophy shaped like a neural chip. She wore a gray jumpsuit stained with engine grease. Her speech was short, unscripted, and honest. "I started by fixing radios," she said. "Then I met a woman who gave me something bigger to repair her memory." The crowd laughed quietly. She smiled. His name was Benjamin. A clock, a friend, a storyteller. She held up a small handheld device, sleek silver, about the size of a cassette. "This is Echo." A pause. "It's the first prototype from our new project, AI designed not to predict the future, but to remember the past. Personal memory assistants that don't sell your data, don't push ads, don't finish your sentences for you. They just listen, like Benjamin did." The screen behind her lit up with the logo. Project Echo Memory Preserved. Inspired by Agnes and the Clock. The room erupted in applause. Somewhere in the crowd, Agnes sat beside Lucas, blinking back tears. "I didn't even know what AI meant when I met that girl," she whispered. Lucas grinned. "Now you're its godmother." The home in Arizona didn't change much. Agnes refused to renovate it. Said the floorboards needed to creak the way Roger left them. Said the chipped paint on the kitchen cabinets reminded her that nothing real stays perfect. Lucas came by twice a week, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to water the cacti with her. Once he brought his dog, an old mutt named Radar, who immediately fell asleep on Agnes's feet, like he'd known her for years. They planted a new agave out front, hung a swing from the porch for no reason other than it looked nice in the wind. And then one morning they built something together, a stone marker. Nothing fancy, just sandstone from the ridge polished by hand, etched with care. They placed it in this back garden beside the tallest saguaro. It read, "In memory of Roger Santiago, he built a clock that knew how to love." Agnes stood before it as the sun rose, Benjamin in her hands, the desert still wrapped in that early morning hush. Lucas touched her shoulder. "You ready?" Agnes nodded. They set Benjamin on a small pedestal beneath the stone. He no longer ticked, no longer blinked. But somehow that silence didn't feel empty. It felt complete. Later that week, Henry visited. Not as a son, not as a thief, just as a man trying to live with himself. He helped Agnes change a porch light, repaired the back fence, sat with her under the eaves drinking coffee he didn't know how to make right. They didn't talk much, but when he stood to leave, she reached for his hand. "You're not forgiven," she said. "That's not something I can give you, but you're not forgotten either." He nodded. "Neither are you." He walked to his car, slower now, not from age, from humility. That night, Agnes sat alone at her old wooden table. The house was still. The moon was high. She opened a fresh page in her notebook, wrote carefully, "My dearest, it's over now. Or maybe it's just beginning. Henry is learning how to serve without taking. Lucas is learning how to grieve without anger. And I'm learning how to live without losing. The world is loud again, but this time it feels like music." Juno's project made headlines. She sent me the first working prototype of Echo. It doesn't talk yet, just listens. I like it better that way. I sit with it some mornings, tell it stories, yours, ours, his, hers, mine, and I think of you, always. She paused, looked at Benjamin still motionless by the window, and whispered, "You brought him home." Then she closed the notebook, stood up, walked to the porch. The wind had picked up. It danced through the chimes, the cacti, the loose strands of her silver hair. She sat on the old bench, placed Benjamin in her lap. The desert glowed under the stars. Agnes leaned down, pressed her lips to the cold brass of the clock's rim, and said, "Finally, my son is home."